Good morning, and looking again at facing evil, and you may hear a few clanks and bangs in the background due to some scaffolders taking down scaffolding. I hope it's not going to be too noisy. Well, I've said several times that I believe the first 11 chapters of Genesis are not to be taken literally, but they are God's account of the problem that we are facing. The great issue, the great challenge of humanity is that we are meant to face evil and defeat it. What actually happens quite often, I'm sorry to say, is we don't face evil and evil defeats us. And the last of these teaching stories is the Tower of Babel story in Genesis 11. So I'm going to read that little story, starting verse 1. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone, and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they've begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Called Babel, in Hebrew that sounds like the word for confusion. And of course that's Babylon. Babel is another version of the name of Babylon. And today I want to talk about the city. Babylon is the archetypal godless city in the Bible. Funnily enough, the story of Babel doesn't start really here. The first city builder is Cain. When God curses Cain, he tells him to be a wanderer in the earth, but he doesn't wander. Instead, Cain founds a city. Now that's quite important. The murderer, who is meant to wander, instead chooses not to be exposed to the wanderer's life. He chooses to build a city. That's in Genesis chapter 4, verse 10 to 17. And then again, Nimrod builds a city. He builds Babylon and then goes on to build other cities. That's in Genesis 10, 8 to 11. Nimrod is described as a mighty hunter, and the commentators are divided as to whether that means a mighty warrior or simply a hunter of animals rather than men. But certainly in Babylonian mythology, Nimrod was a mighty warrior. And the constellation we see in the winter sky that we call Orion, they called Nimrod, the hunter. And he founded Babylon, or Babel. And so you could say that in a sense there are two origin stories about Babel. One is the Nimrod story and one is the story in Genesis 11. But I think the very fact that the name is repeated is important, and Babylon features throughout the Bible. And even the great city culture of today is described in the Revelation as Babylon. So the city, the first one founded by a murderer, the next city founded by the mighty warrior, who goes on to spread his empire over neighbouring regions as well. That's Nimrod. But in Genesis 11, it sounds a bit more democratic. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us build a city. Let us use our technology of building bricks. I'm probably going to say more about technology in another meditation. But for now, the desire to be settled, the desire to have a base, and the idea to stand together seems to be the motive for building the Tower of Babel. It may be the whole city was meant to be one tower, or it may be that it was meant to be the center of the city. Now remember that the books of Moses were written in the late Bronze Age. Moses would have seen the pyramids of Egypt. He would have heard of the ziggurats, the great Mesopotamian sort of stepped pyramids that were built around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And so when he talks about building great towers, he's talking about something that was very well known in the Bronze Age period. And the idea that of a city-state, there was quite a lot of trade, went all the way from Afghanistan through to Western Europe, up into the lower reaches around the Black Sea and down past Ethiopia in Africa. And each of the great cities would have its huge buildings, its monuments. So he's not writing about something that he doesn't know. Why? Why do they want to build? Bake their bricks and build their city? I think there are various things going on here, but it's the desire for solidarity as much as anything. The wanderer in the wilderness does feel exposed. Every nationality has its story about the townie lost in the forest or lost in the desert. But I think there's something more going on here. This is people who are estranged from God. No longer do they feel close to him. And if you're out in the wilderness, you get that odd, rather cold experience of God being present but distant at the same time. And the city may not always be safe, but it feels more like home than being exposed to God when you're scattered. But as well as the desire to be settled and have a base, there's this ambition, like the ambition that drove Nimrod to be the first emperor, to build a tower that reaches to heaven. Now, a lot of nonsense has been written about this. I don't think it's really an attempt to usurp God's position. I don't think it's a bid for immortality. It is true that the ziggurats had a religious purpose. According to Herodotus, every ziggurat had a shrine at the top of it. But they had other purposes as well. Moses, if the writer of this is Moses, will have seen the pyramids and will have connected them with the attempt to make the pharaohs immortal and the Egyptian religion. But the ziggurat, unlike the pyramid, was full of rooms. It was a place of safety. If you live on a floodplain, it's nice to have somewhere to go where you can rise above the floods. You could think of it as a kind of reverse bomb shelter, where instead of hiding from the bombs underground, you are safe from the flood by going up the stairs of the ziggurat. It was also a magnificent fortress in time of war. If barbarians invade, make for the ziggurat. It's your castle, it's your fortress. And of course also it's a storehouse, like the storehouses of Joseph in Egypt, a place where the fruit of the fertile plains of Mesopotamia can be stored for the dry season and the hard times. So the tower has lots of purposes, but they're all to do with security. And I think that people are hungry for security. And there's also that other thing about making a name for ourselves. Another thing that sinful man needs is to get a sense of worth from somewhere. Now, the glory of a human is that we're made in the image of God. That's our great honour. But if you're estranged from God, that doesn't feel so good anymore. The sinner wants to be a somebody. He wants recognition. and he wants to be part of a big project. He wants to make a name for himself, or if he can't make a name for himself individually, he wants his nation to be a great nation. He wants his city to be a great city. He wants his people respected or even feared. And he wants the solidarity of the city culture. This is very noticeable in France. The metropolitan pride of the Parisian. But it's also noticeable in London and New York and all over the place, really. What the city dweller will call his civic pride, the countryman will call metropolitan arrogance. That the fact that you're part of something big makes you feel a bit bigger. So for various reasons, men build their cities, they build their monuments, and they club together. But the next thing is how easily God ends this project. He doesn't do anything destructive. He just gives every man his own personal language. Now you could say that's a gift. I know many children who have fun inventing their own languages. It's good play. And it can be fun, language. I'm a very bad linguist. I don't learn languages well, but when I'm in Nigeria, I have fun messing about with my Hausa. In Seville, I enjoyed trying Spanish. In Vienna, it's German, and so on. In Bordeaux, it's French. But languages can be fun, but here the languages become a cause of complete alienation. Because one of the problems in the city is that everybody wants to talk, but hardly anybody wants to listen. And they're completely scattered now, because each man has his own language. All you have to do to divide these people up, to wreck their project, is give them different languages. And that tells us that really they were always divided, weren't they? The different languages just show up that their solidarity was an illusion, it was a lie. Their egotism is revealed. The Babylonian doesn't want to love his neighbour. He doesn't want someone who is different from himself. He wants a copy of himself. He wants his neighbour to be a copy of him. Most racists are narcissists, actually. And this is the ugly secret of our cities. They look like great examples of common purpose and unity. But of course, cities like London are built on cold economics and social contracts. Yes, if you don't play your part in the great machine, you will not eat. So this is our ugly city. And all it takes to divide a city into warring factions is a tiny thing. 2 different football teams can divide a city. Constantinople went to war over different teams of chariot racers. Ethnic differences, social differences, class divides. Yes, we do find that our cities, which on the surface seem to be well-oiled machines, actually are like Babel. All you have to do is introduce a bit of difference and they fall apart. In fact, the coldest and loneliest places to live in the 1960s were the cities of the communist countries. In communism, the propaganda was all about solidarity and shared struggle. The reality was that every man was suspicious of his neighbour and was looking out for himself. So there you are, the godless city divided against itself. But I do want to just end on a slightly more hopeful note. Because what we Christians look forward to is a city. We're not going back to the garden. We're going forward to Jerusalem, the city of light, the golden city in the future. We are already citizens of Zion. We belong to that city, although at the moment we're exiled in Babylon. And we're advised not to be destructive. Jeremiah, writing to the Hebrews, says, work and pray for the well-being of the city, that is Babylon. We have to face the fact that there is more evil in the city than it appears. It is, to a large extent, an illusion of unity. But we have to resist the selfishness, the egotism. We have to resist also the false solidarity of ethnic pride or propaganda, urban snobbery, which takes many forms. And we have to love our neighbour as ourselves in Babylon. We have to resist the evil unity and the evil division of the city. We have to live as citizens of the city that's coming. So that's our challenge. Face the evil of the city, but do and live the life of Jerusalem. I hope that's not too philosophical. Anyway, you can tell me. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you for now.